is that the countries which find an external role for their militaries tend to find domestic stability faster.
Welcome to the Bad Natives. My name, Robert Kavshinga, the Bad Native from Kampala, and I'm your host today. And it's a wonderful time in Kampala. It was very gray and cool in the morning, so the temperatures are now down, but the sun has come out again. So, how is Johannesburg?
Hi, Bob. It's Ferial in Johannesburg here. Absolutely beautiful day. We've just had showers and there's a beautiful sun out again. Really the perfect summer weather here.
Is this when the jacarandas come out?
No, the jacarandas are finished already and it was a
Yeah,
beautiful
so,
season.
you
Let's
had
check on
something
Nairobi.
on your newsletter, is it? Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm Charles Onyango Obo in Nairobi. It's a bit hot, and there was just a strange story from a region of Kenya called Trans Nzoia.
Mhm.
There has been no rain there, and the people in Trans Nzoia are saying it's because the neighboring communities carrying out circumcision. Circumcision has chased rain.
African explanations for natural phenomena are
Fabulous.
out of.
Because they are saying that the people, I think it's the Port Court community, because after the young boys, the boys have been circumcised, they are kind of kept together in a group somewhere.
Mhm.
And I think it's kind of an opening or something. And for them to make the days they're supposed to stay together, it doesn't need to rain. So they are saying that the elders in that place have cast a spell on the rain.
I've forgotten, when I was studying law, they told us that Africans had, I forget what the technical term is, trial by something. But the only way they found that you are guilty is they gave you some bitter herbs. If your stomach reacted in a particular way, you are guilty. So they say, but guys, two big stories out of Africa. So finally, Donald Trump has a peace deal. So, and finally, people are beginning to talk about the famous prize from Scandinavia and his name in the same sentence. This is the signing of the agreement between DRC and Rwanda. Now, before we dive into it, I will tell you what for me was eye-catching about that story. Charles, do you want to guess?
No.
Period, do you want to guess?
Where it was
You had
signed?
No, you had about 9 or 10 African heads of state sat on benches like primary school kids. you saw who was the school teacher in that whole arrangement, and the kids who were the reasons why they were there. But there was also a second big story, which was a coup in Benin, which was then reversed. And I think that for me, the story there is the fact that powers stepped in to reverse the coup, because all along coups have held in Western Africa, particularly. But in Benin, these guys go on TV, they don't even bother to mask themselves, they announce a coup, and then within 5 or 6 hours, they're on the run. Um, Charles, let me start with you. Let's start in Benin, but then we'll probably go back to Rwanda and DRC because, in a sense, they're linked. Two francophone countries, Rwanda involved in both. What's the story with Benin, and why did Nigeria step in? And what's going on?
Well, Bob, uh, Benin is very interesting because after the end of the Cold War,
Yeah.
Benin was one of the first African countries that fell into the democracy wave. There
Yes.
was a strongman there, Kerekou.
Matthew. Matthew
yeah,
Kereku.
and he held the first national conference,
Yes.
dialogue. And from there, it's been smooth sailing. That is a country which hadn't had a coup since 1972.
Wow.
So, so just in terms of precedent,
Mm.
if if this had succeeded, it would have been a shocker.
Mm.
Secondly, President Patrice Talon had
Mm.
actually respected the term limits because they have already done the nominations for the next elections,
Mm.
and and he's not running. Although there was controversy about some opposition candidates who were not, allowed to get on the roll, but
Mm.
but he was stepping down. But I think that the reason why you see it seems so many players, including this time even France, is
Mm.
because unlike Niger, Mali, or Burkina Faso, Benin was an example.
Mm.
It is an economic success.
Mhm.
It has very low inflation. It has neat cities.
Mm.
Uh, it really represents everything that is shining in West Africa. So it
Mm.
seems that the stakes were too high.
Yeah.
If Benin had fallen,
Mhm.
then the whole narrative about the premium then of other West African democracy would have collapsed. And so I think that because of that, it was the price was simply too high. It seemed
Mm.
that Nigeria and other players finally stepped up and said, no, this will not happen. Of course, they were helped by some mistakes by the coup makers themselves. But
Well,
but
well, they were a bit shabby, Charles. They looked like just, they looked
yeah,
so
yeah.
pedestrian in their,
They made
you
obviously
know,
they didn't do the mobilization, and there are some very strategic things these days, and you saw
mm,
that in we saw that in Gabon, we saw that in Guinea with the Mamadou. You
yeah,
must bring the presidential guard. You cannot,
yes.
because these days the presidential guard is still the most elite units. So you cannot
Mhm.
move in a coup and you haven't spoken to anyone. Even Niger, it was the same. You must have the conversation with the presidential guard.
But Charles, I mean, Furio, even purely from the visuals, these guys just look shabby. The others have been coming in some kind of attire that speaks
Yes.
of authority. So, what did you think of these characters? Well, they looked rather comical to me.
They did. And I must say, what Traore has shown us is the importance of image if you want
Mm.
a crew to sustain it, a coup to sustain itself. You have to have social media, you have to have image, you have to project probably in a quite a young, futuristic fashion. And certainly that wasn't clear in Benin. Also, I think people have realized that coups were becoming ineluctable again, like ever present, and one country after the next. So personally, I'm very happy that that one was stopped. What I'm interested in finding out from you is why is people not taking to the streets a big factor in these coups? Because I suppose where I come from, that's the first thing that would happen is people wouldn't allow it to continue.
Well, if I look at first of all, before I even answer that question, there is an additional story to what Charles said. So Matthew Kereku, who started Benin on the journey to democracy, was an old Marxist one-party state guy.
Yeah,
Then he organizes a multi-party democracy election and he loses. Then he comes back later after 2 terms, stands and wins. And then he comes back as president. So, in a sense, he established the democratic tradition of West Africa. And so, if you allowed this coup to stand, then Ghana is fair game,
Yeah.
Cote d'Ivoire is fair game, and so is Nigeria. And suddenly, the military, who are unpredictable, come in. But Charles was right that there was no political mobilization of the population. Charles, what I understand was that this may have been a small faction of political operators linked to the former president, a chap called Yai Boni.
Yeah.
So, but he's so unpopular, and these guys, I think, so what they saw was that the successor to Patrice Talon is going to win hands down, and so they're likely to be in the cold for another 10 years. So it was a very local contest, local in the sense that, and so for that reason, they could not even appeal to a strategic superpower like either Russia or China and play to the gallery of minerals. And unlike Guinea, they don't have criminal networks that would have sustained them. So, but you see, I also think the real direct answer to your question, Furio, is that I think in Cotonou, the people must have been a bit confused because they didn't understand, one, what was the coup all about? Number two, why has it happened? Does it not happen? Because it wasn't clear whether the coup had actually succeeded. So you couldn't have had a public reaction either for or against it because it was confused from the beginning until these guys were run out of town. But the bigger contrast, of course, is the same reason why in some of these cities you saw demonstrations either in support or because in Benin the state hasn't failed. The state has actually worked.
Yeah.
Now, in these other countries, the state has been failing the people, and that's why you saw public reaction in support of any form of action that people perceive as saving them from what the fate that they were facing, because there was so much violence, so much poverty. Niger was slightly different because Niger was a question of the previous government was quite successful, but the problem there was that there were superpower interests and questions about uranium and all of that came into play.
But also very high levels of poverty, Bob. Very high levels of poverty. They had no energy. It was really. But the other thing is structure. I just wrote an article for the Monday. One of the things when I looked at West Africa, I was struck by one thing. West Africa does not have a liberation party in power. It's the only region that doesn't have a liberation party, ruling party with a revolutionary background, in place.
Yes.
North Africa has the LN, in Algeria, Southern Africa has many of them. Central Africa has. East Africa.
I think Charles,
but
the
the reason
only
why that is important, yeah.
Now, I was going to say the only countries with some kind of revolutionary tradition or element is Ghana, Guinea-Conakry, and then Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, because that's sort of
but a revolutionary element,
and Burkina Faso too.
They don't have an incumbent party.
Oh yeah,
and,
okay.
Yeah. And one of the reasons for that, and it was a very uncomfortable conclusion for me, it seems that liberation movements provide a lot of stability.
Yes.
that we have not had a coup which brought in an external force in a country led by a liberation movement. Even in the case of Zimbabwe, it was an internal process. And that stability comes from something which is essentially problematic. This is the fusion of the military and the state, because government's a condominium between the military and the politics. And the one place where it is not is South Africa. And that is why the ANC can lose its majority. so you might want to talk to the comrades at what is that ANC house?
Lutuli House.
Lutuli House.
Yeah, Lutuli House. They need to inject in to bring the Mkoto Isizwe, the more enlightened elements into the system.
The problem with the Furios is that Comrade JZ captured that wing, which would have played that role. But the problem is he captured it for his own selfish reasons, and now that's catching up with him. But seriously speaking, talking about Furio on a more um, a larger outlook, why what can other regions of Africa learn from Southern Africa about political intermediation? Because even when you look at Zimbabwe, it never really was a coup, and the soldiers were at pains to say this is not a coup. They even went to negotiate with the person they were trying to remove from office
Yeah.
to say, uncle, can you leave now? Can we? How do we arrange? It was,
Yeah.
it was like sons going to their father to say, first leave the business. You go home. We shall handle the customers. So the, what are the political lessons that we draw from, you know, whether it's, Mozambique, Botswana, you people in Southern Africa? What is it about your political tradition that can teach other regions on how to resolve political differences in a non-violent? What institutional capacity do you have that places like either the Sudan or Chad or all of these, the Burkina Fasos of this world, what happens?
So you probably know more about our region than I do, but what I did want to share is that recently the chief of the SA National Defense Force made a political statement. I think it was
Mhm.
something about underfunding of the military, and he made it in an intemperate and undiplomatic way. And he was
Mm.
very quickly upbraided by the defense minister and by the cabinet. And I
Mm.
suppose I'm interested in a tradition that says the army must be depoliticized, it must be apolitical and has
Mm.
been depoliticized. And for me, that's been a guarantor against a coup. The police less so, because in 2021, when we had what the president called a near insurrection in Durban, actually you saw, I think, the police behaving in a partisan fashion. So for me, it's about making sure your institutions are insulated. I think that's good for Botswana, and maybe in the ways you spoke of Zimbabwe, and maybe those are the tradition that comes from um, either the democratization processes or the abilities of liberation movement and governing parties to keep those armies in check. I'm not sure what the answer is,
Well,
right?
let me hazard. Yeah, Charles, go ahead.
You know what? The advantage that Southern Africa has as a region, and then now I'm beginning to think that for us, for democracy, it seems has a better chance when it is in an ecosystem where you have at least more than one or two genuine liberal politics.
I
Southern
guess.
Africa has South Africa, and South Africa is really a credible constitutional democracy. It has one, not just Africa, one of the world's most liberal constitutions. You have, the Botswanas, you have, the Mauritius, Zambia and Malawi are erratic, but they basically try. They have not dallied with this thing of scrapping term limits and all those kind of things. So they are, not even just uh, uh, political liberal political orders, but even socially so. Because you see, in Southern Africa is the region with the lowest. The lowest number of countries which have the death penalty. They have got the highest number of countries that have legalized weed. They have the highest number of countries where they have decriminalized homosexuality. So it seems that the political and those kind of social freedom usually tend to have a knock-on effect.
Mm,
In West Africa, it's it's not going too badly. Nigeria is a dysfunctional democracy. I think Ghana is slightly better, and Senegal itself is stuttering on the edge. So and West Africa is really socially very conservative. It's like East Africa. The only place we have really is Kenya. Uganda is socially conservative, but by action, not by legislation. I mean,
mhm,
is socially very liberal. So I think that is, and it's also why Southern Africa has the lowest levels of terrorism, for example. So I think that
mhm.
that help, the region considerably.
Charles, back to the well, just wanted to point out that for East Africa, I think two histories: the history of Kenya and the history of Uganda. Well, three and Tanzania, and how they've responded to military entry into the political arena. And I think the most successful ones were Kenya and Tanzania, and then later on Uganda. And Uganda followed the tradition of Tanzania. Tanzania disbanded the colonial army and did what it called a politicized army. Uganda followed that tradition. Rwanda the same. Kenya took the route of the professionalization of the army in the British tradition because the British wouldn't allow a coup to sort of take place. So in that sense, yes. But Charles, one more aspect of and to you, Furio, as well, of this is the intervention of Nigeria and the muscular manner in which Nigeria moved into Benin to reverse the coup. There's the element of ECOWAS, but why were the stakes high enough for Nigeria to stake its military in the manner it did not in Niger or even in the other West African countries? It never tried to save ECOWAS reputation in the what why now? Why now for Nigeria?
Well, remember Nigeria also just had a few weeks ago
Mm,
this thing of whether there had been a coup attempt, and then they had to change the military leadership. They seem to be on the back foot around this renewed activity by jihadist groups and extremist groups, and so the defense minister stepped down. So there is a sense in which President Bola Tinubu himself must have felt a sense of personal peril, and that
mhm,
then Benin gives him an opportunity to demonstrate the fact that he is alive to these dangers and he will not go quietly. And
mhm,
that 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 is one. But one of the things we learned from the democratization of Latin America is that
mhm,
the countries which find an external role for their militaries tend to find domestic stability faster.
mhm.
Because you need to give your soldiers a grander vision. If it is, beating peasants who are refusing to grow coffee and market women. So it has been demonstrated that giving them a grand vision kind of
Mm.
actually tend to keep them away from seeking to seize
Mm.
state house.
uh, and Furio, to you, how important is it for a region to have a big player like Nigeria? And you guys are the big players in South Africa.
Clearly, for Benin, it was really important, and President Tinubu probably found himself looking and feeling quite impotent with the insurgencies and kidnappings, and he needed to reassert his role in the region and on the continent. I think that it's generally been a good thing, and to show the ability to do so. Obviously, in South Africa, we go very like gashle with being the big brother here because you can get into a lot of regional trouble, and it's probably why we've been um, less interventionist in Zimbabwe than perhaps we should have been. And so we now sit with maybe 4 to 6 million Zimbabwean people who live in South Africa. And that's beginning to cause a political, not a crisis, but a political issue for South Africa.
Mm. And talking of intervention, Charles, Rwanda, interesting country. They were in Benin. Tell us
Well,
about it.
no, but I can't say that. I know that in, I think, 2, 3 years ago, they initialized, they initialed a military cooperation agreement.
Mhm.
And I think they have been working with Benin mostly around counterterrorism because, northern Benin, is beginning to have that contagion of the
Mhm.
jihadist problem. So, it seemed that they were involved there. But I guess it is like Uganda in Equatorial Guinea. If the guys are around,
Yeah,
and they see the big man is under threat, they
yeah.
and they
They
have
they help out.
they have a story of being very muscular. So I wouldn't be
Yeah,
surprised if
they helped out in Central African Republic. But Furio, on a more interesting note is, Rwanda every year, Rwanda has been leading on international security architecture and actually has a very, very well attended and very respected engagement, international summit that happens in Rwanda every year around questions of security in Africa. And it seems that, it's not just its actions in stabilizing difficult places, seems to have earned it quite a bit of respect, even in the White House. Your good
Yes.
friend, the Donald, had them over. Furio, what do you make of the fact that, you know, Trump uh, took a slightly more progressive position on Africa instead of calling us all sorts of names? Was trying to solve and had all of these African heads of state there, Burundi, Kenya, the Ugandan vice president was there, PK was there, Chisekedi was there. Talk to us about what you make of the deal, the DRC deal between.
So obviously it was a coup, and it comes in a week or a month where President Donald Trump is trying to project himself as a global peacemaker. I saw that he wants to have a Ukraine-Russia peace deal signed by Christmas. He's obviously after the Nobel, as Charles said. But personally, I have to tell you, I don't know that it's going to work. It's co-brokered by Qatar, I think it is. I don't know that an imposed piece, even though it had the key role players in the room, can work in that region, and that it probably has to be an intra-African, a pan-African, long peacemaking and talks which should happen to solve what is our continent's longest running, most deathly war. So I don't hold out much hope for it, but I'd love to hear a different view from you. Obviously, from where I'm sitting, it's a little bit of divide and rule tactics as well, because the Donald is really, really angry with South Africa and doesn't feel like we fall into line on any number of issues. So I think there is that factor there as well, although it wasn't pronounced in the actual talks themselves.
Charles, what do you make of it?
But you said at the beginning that there were all these African leaders, all Carol to president. They were allowed to speak, and really, you could see Trump just couldn't wait for them to finish and sit down. Um, but I think that but the important thing about that is that he recognized that to get a bit of some of this currency that Pharaoh is talking about. He needed a show that the region, the peace mediators from the previous event, that they were there and were endorsing it. He took it to the Peace Institute, which he has named after himself. So he avoided that.
In true African tradition.
He's one of us that the Donald. So, so the so he and he avoided that scene, those scenes of his that the state house where he, at the Oval Office where he sits and then he humiliates
Mhm.
the rest of the people. So I mean, he really tried, but like Pharaoh, there are a couple of problems because one of the things
Mm.
is that as they were
Mm.
signing, there was fighting in South Kivu,
Mhm.
and 20,000 people were fleeing into Rwanda because, and here's the thing, because it seems that or that at least some of Tshisekedi's allies, like Burundi, they felt that the facts on the ground at the signing of the agreement were unfavorable. So they didn't want an agreement to come into effect eventually, and those facts are frozen on the ground against them. So I think that they wanted to retake some of the territories in the south, Kivu. But and as we speak now, actually, it is likely that by the weekend, the M23 will have taken Uvira,
Mhm.
and yeah, they have been advancing very rapidly.
Mm.
Secondly, and I agree with the Pharaoh here, is that there is a sense in which the Trump himself is not really interested in this for the peace.
Yeah.
He just wants it as an alibi for an alibi for his claim to. He wants a real Nobel, and I think that the FIFA Peace Prize, which he pushed them to give him, was really a humiliation. So
Mm.
so 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 there is that. But and it is really shocking if you look at the text.
Mm.
In fact, a lot of people are saying that this is not a Rwanda Congo agreement. They said this is a US DRC Congo minerals agreement.
Mm.
I
Yes.
think
Mm.
that it
I think it's a
speaks more
minerals
about
agreement.
minerals. Yeah?
You guys want to talk a
It's a
bit more
minerals
to that,
agreement. It
please.
speaks more about
No, please help our listeners and viewers
yeah.
understand this. What do you mean it is a minerals? So again, the it's truly Trumpian in the sense that, from what you're saying, it's a transactional agreement about a deal. So it's
Yeah.
the art of the deal again. So do you want to help our people understand when you say it's a minerals deal and not a peace deal?
Fair or fast.
Sure. Yeah, happily. So, I mean, it's well known that the DRC contains the critical minerals that the US and actually the world desperately needs. It's the biggest holder of them on our continent. And whereas the G20 agreement says that what has to happen for the good of Africa is that you want to beneficiate those minerals here as a growth driver, along with the free continental trade area, infrastructure growth, etc. This is the way that you begin to deal with debt, etc. Obviously, that's not America's model. It wants the raw stuff and it wants it for export. And so, for me, this is what underpins that deal, as well as the projection of the US president as a peacemaker. It's much more about critical minerals. If you watch President Trump going through the Middle East on his trip there earlier this year, same thing. It was all about the deals being signed. It's who's in the delegation. There's the people he takes along with him are signing massive deals. And I think if we look carefully, you'll see that exactly the same thing happened this week.
And it is shocking. There is language there which basically gives America the right of first refusal on any mineral deal. That you can't, if
Wow.
yeah, if there's a concession or there's anything, you can only excise it when if the Americans are not interested. And there is even language, depending on how you read it, which seems to suggest that DRC cannot make legislation on
Wow.
minerals without, yeah. So it is really, it is shocking, and it raises the question that if it is that kind of deal, does Chisekedi have what it takes actually? Because he's handing it over. And there are all these elites who profit from that thing. The deal
Mm.
endangers their interest. So 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 that so that raises question. And then the most problematic, I think, element of it, because the US wants the minerals exported quietly, they do recognize that DRC might not have the capacity to do the first phase. Basically, like you, Bob, you do like cleaning your coffee and things like that.
We call it
So
primary processing.
have,
Hmm.
you know, so the the the, the deal suggests that actually, as we wait for the Congo to get the DRC to get its act together, you can do the primary processing in Rwanda. Oh, come on, guys, come on, come
Oh.
on.
Oh.
So
Oh.
so 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 that was, and it is a very strange deal. In the
Mm.
sense that what was actually very good, and they essentially removed all references to Rwanda except in a few instances. So I mean, they really did a very good job of it. So I mean, it's a
Yeah.
very good deal for them. People should hire Kagame's team to do these deals for them. They are very, they are very, very smart. They know where to focus. But so if that kind of thing in a situation where Tshisekedi himself has made the outstand, the fall of Kagame, such a central pillar of his politics. You it cannot stand for long. I mean, he would have to choose between his presidency and the argument. So
Mm.
it's really doubtful that we are going to go anywhere with that.
And that raises an important element which somebody once explained to me because I couldn't understand Chisekedi's behavior until somebody explained to me that he was playing to the Kinshasa political gallery, which is completely worlds apart from what's happening in Eastern Congo. And so, in a sense, if Chisekedi has a deal which doesn't uh, satisfy the political establishment in Kinshasa and the south of Congo and even parts of the north and northeast, Tshisekedi is going to be political history very, very quickly. And likely he will probably be removed. Now, of course, um, clearly, I think this agreement is also an acknowledgement of the military reality on the ground that the M23, which is allied to Rwanda, is in effective control of the most valuable parts of Eastern Congo. Now, and any other kind of agreement would have been, difficult to. But a very quick question is: so, what is Qatar's benefit from all of this? Because, when the Emir of Qatar was on his way to the G20, he paid a visit, a very high-profile visit to Rwanda, one in which President Kagame literally received him at the foot of the aircraft. He was at the airport on hand to welcome him. Clearly, to me, that was a precursor to what happened in Washington. So, might you guys know what Qatar either stands to gain, either in terms of prestige or resources on the African continent, and in terms of Middle Eastern politics. Any
Well,
perspectives?
they are because in many ways,
Mm,
Qatar is in charge of the more important process because
yeah.
that one involves the M23.
Okay.
This other Washington is thing is and the fact the M23 can say they are not bound by it,
Yes.
and Rwanda can say, well, the most we can do is persuade them.
Yeah.
So 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 I think that in terms of and then the Qatar issues also addresses the interests of other players like Burundi. It speaks to that, and
Mm.
so that
Oh,
is one.
okay.
But Qatar, like you say, when the Mir came, he also went to he also visited Chisekedi, by the way.
Oh, okay.
But 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 the contrasts were for the first time people saw him in a t-shirt and jeans, and
Yes.
taking photos of cows, and I think Kagame gave him 10 Inyabo cows. Is that what they call them? Whatever, you know better.
Inyambo.
And
Mm.
Inyambo. Eh?
Mm.
So it drove him, and
And
he's
Charles, for historical context, the Chivus was the grazing grounds of the Umwami of Rwanda's cattle. In history,
That's interesting. But we
yes.
should also remember that Qatar has chosen Kagame as its key ally on the continent. They own a
Mm,
part of Rwanda Air. They are massive investors there. He obviously, the emir, sees Paul Kagame as the de facto top statesperson on the
mm.
continent. And if you see at the Doha Forum, he's often the leading figure there. So he's made it very clear. I mean, he's not that close to President Ramaphosa or to anyone in Southern Africa, neither to Nigeria. So he has chosen Kagame as his key ally for
and
various
seems
reasons.
and seems to have introduced him to the Saudi establishment as well, where I
Yes,
think he's
exactly. Huh?
probably the only sub-Saharan leader who has that level of. But let me throw another spanner in this whole thing, Charles. I thought Charles would point this out, but let me be the bad boy of it. The most interesting country that we've not talked about in that deal is Uganda. So, in Charles understands the symbolism. So, Furio, so guess who Uganda
Yes,
sent to the peace agreement? The vice
I'd
president.
love to know.
It's the vice president. Now, the vice president is, in protocol terms, looks like high level representation of Uganda at the summit. But to
Yes.
all the players who understand the geopolitics know that she's the most inconsequential and irrelevant person at the table because she's of zero import in the goings on in that place. So you see, and I don't know if you remember a couple of weeks back, I said, you've got to see who Museveni sends you. So for Raila's funeral, he sent Rugunda. That was a very powerful statement. So why did he send uh, somebody who the country doesn't even know is in office? The country. But remember that Uganda has troops in Eastern Congo and is part of the issues currently of how Congo should be resolved. Then somebody whispered to me that Trump, on arrival, one of the missions that was supposed to be closed in Africa was Uganda. But what forced them to have second thoughts about the mission in Uganda was they needed to manage Eastern Congo through Uganda. The US understood, I think, either on advice from the Brits or whatever, that to manage Eastern Congo, you needed Uganda's involvement. And therefore, You need to maintain that mission, and that's the primary role of the mission here. Otherwise, guys were saying, no, they've just invested in a big embassy. Guys said that's a small building. It's not even worth what they own in DC. It's not even a small town. But the point was, so the interesting thing is that there's been no mention, no engagement by Uganda or even about this agreement. In fact, the only countries that seem to get high profile and discussion about it is Burundi, Kenya, and of
Yeah.
course Angola. But Uganda seemed completely absent. You even in the pictures, you don't see our vice president anywhere. But the other thing for me, to both of you, is the way African presidents now decided to milk their one opportunity to access Trump. You saw the same script that we've seen with European leaders, Arab leaders, this sort of obsequious praise of Trump and how he is an incredible thinker, worked so hard on the peace deal, and you could see that guys were invested in making sure that they get the most of it. And so, Ruto
Is
made.
it because of is it for AGOA?
No, I don't think so. I actually think that what has happened is that African presidents don't know how to deal with Trump. And many of them have been trying to catch his eye and to get him engaged because a relationship with the United States guarantees your hold on power in this part of the world.
But,
So,
it seems that actually
mhm,
there was some action on AGOA because at least, and
yeah,
I think the foreign minister and others are confirming that there will be an extension. It may not be a long
yes.
one, but there will certainly be one. And Bob, what you and Phil said takes us back to the Sun City process. I
Mm,
think that unless we have a process like Sun City, and it's going to be
mm,
messy, it will not happen in some months, because the
mm,
Sun City process stabilized stabilized Eastern Congo for nearly 10 years until
yes.
other dynamics then
Yeah.
came. In fact, the failure was by Kinshasa to honor
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
commitments it had made to groups like, the M23. Well, at that time it was not M23.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to go back to that because you say Uganda, they, let us put it crudely, there
Hmm.
are three authorities in DRC. There
Yes.
is the Kinshasa government,
Yes.
and literally they are, the two powers that call the shots in eastern DRC are Rwanda and Uganda
Mhm.
to the north of it,
Precisely.
and yeah, to the northern part of the eastern region,
Hmm.
and in fact the Uganda control is probably, and the Museveni's people have been very good at managing, the appearances of this. Their
Mm.
control is even harder,
Mm.
in the two regions, and in fact, was because of that that you say, you guys, you you. You really think you can even get these minerals
Hmm.
without Kampala playing along in this game? It's not gonna happen. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's not gonna happen.
And and correctly so, Charles, because someone pointed out to me. So let's first go back to the question of AGOA and what was in it for the Africans.
Yeah.
Apparently, the right wingers in the US, the Rubios and these guys, because they want to cut out the what they call the liberals and the left wing and the NGO world, then made a decision that all assistance from the US is going to go directly to the governments now. They're not going to have implementing agencies as was the case before. So, yes, we removed USAID, but we had our own reasons for dismantling it. It has nothing to do with you guys. Okay, fine. We will give you something to go and sell called AGOA. You can say it's been extended, but quietly, we will give money directly to those governments that work with us on ABCD. So
Yeah.
there seems to have been some quiet deals on that front.
Hmm.
And that's why you see a man like Ruto has an interesting bounce now in his step, because he seems to have closed some interesting deals while he was there. So that's the element to do with assistance, AGOA, and all of those things. Now,
Yes.
the regional powers that Charles is talking about, which become very interesting for me, is again, this is something somebody pointed out to me, and it will determine how this goes, is that the outcome of Eastern Congo will depend on the question of how Uganda and Rwanda manage their bilateral relationship. Now, if Rwanda feels that Uganda seems to be, as I am told the conventional wisdom is now, that Uganda doesn't seem to be on one side. They seem to be managing their own way, their own usual way. They deal with this one, deal with that one, deal with the other. That I think is could create a problem on how they jointly manage. But also there are business interests in managing these minerals. So if the agreement says secondary processing or whatever primary processing will be done in Rwanda, that is an industry in which Uganda is hugely invested as well, especially to do with gold, and which is what we are now trying to use in our leverage with the Emirates. So we are
Hmm.
going to enter some very, very, and you know, a lot of military people are involved in intermediating these transactions, securing routes, bringing people in, you know, connecting the different players,
Hmm.
and you know, it's the usual murky world of gold. So it's going to be
Hmm.
interesting to see how Uganda one manages the new dispensation and whatever. What does Uganda get in return from the US? Because they've also been lobbying heavily to try and get into Trump's world and see what they can come up with. But also, we are distracted by our national election, so that sort of is in the way. It's not clear who is where and what they're doing. So that's also still in abeyance. But obviously, for me, my beloved country, you can see we sorely miss some very strategic thinkers who used to be uh, part of our our foreign policy, who are not there anymore. That is a tough one. Okay, so
Yeah,
guys, yeah, Charles, one more word, and
I
then we
saw
do our.
there was an interview I think on Piers Morgan and South Africa's former ambassador at the US, Rasul, who was kicked out by Rubio, and he was on. Hmm? And
Mm.
the bugger is clever. You know, he's really good. And this thing you're saying that you have to go to smart people. You then actually begin to say, these Muzanzi brothers and sisters of ours, they
Mm.
are very good people, man. They are very
Oh
good
yeah,
people.
oh yeah,
and
oh yeah.
and and they might just save you, Pharaoh. They might just save you in this
But,
turbulent world.
and you know, Charles, the
That's good to
beauty of
hear.
no, but the beauty of our South African guys is that they don't personalize these things, and it's not family rule. So they if Charles Obo is the best person for the job, they will send him and facilitate him as long as it helps the country. Part of our problem
Yeah.
is that we've descended into okay, let's do our good or bad event of the week. Start with you, Firio.
So I'll do my interesting parting shot for you. You know that President Cyril Ramaphosa is now at the beginning of his end, and so the National General Council is happening, and there are six candidates who want to replace him as the president of the ANC. There's one candidate who doesn't want to replace him, but whose name has come up, and that's Patrice Motsepe, the
No,
billionaire, football club owner, businessman,
president
miner,
of
green energy
president of
guy,
CAF.
and
He's
so
president of
president
CAF.
of CAF. So he's come up as the most popular candidate to replace the president, even though he has said repeatedly, the pollsters still used his name because he's come up and he is the brother in law of the president, more popular than any of the other candidates who may yet put up their hands. Isn't that interesting?
Wow,
Wow.
that's
Okay, so
fast, huh?
yeah, so mine was from the weekend, and I went to the northern city of Gulu in Uganda. So I went to run. I guess that's not a surprise for you guys. I went to run a marathon there. I hadn't been I hadn't been to Gulu in almost 7 years.
Oh,
Gulu
oh,
was for 25 years caught up in an unending conflict, and it was like it was destroyed. I was very, very, very pleasantly surprised. It is, Charles, I kid you not, it is the most appropriate of all the new cities to take that description. It's clean, its roads are wide, the traffic is well managed, the business is booming, the people are very proud of what they have, and
It's nice.
the avenues that used to have
yeah,
old and aging trees have been preserved, and it feel there is a particular avenue that felt like driving through Pretoria. I'm telling you, it's that
yeah,
nice, like an old neighborhood of Pretoria. Charles, the Partridges are actually in, and those places. So you
yeah.
can see that it's coming out. And by the way, the
It's
guys
coming out,
from there
and
are very happy with themselves. So it was wonderful to have gone there and to see what Gulu has become. By the way, Charles, just so to show you how bad it was, I couldn't find my way back to actually in. I got lost. That's how good.
Bob, I've gone to Gulu every year in the last 6 years, except this year.
Oh,
So,
it's brilliant.
so I've been. You're right. It is fascinating. Mine, today I'll not be mischievous. I will just.
We don't
I
trust you.
want to be sunny. No, no, no. And both you and Phil, you should go on DSTV. There is a documentary there called Echoes of Tomorrow. The
Mhm.
Echoes of Tomorrow is about this the state of jazz in South Africa
Wow.
today. And it is really a remarkable thing. It has become the music of young people. So you have all these guys, young people going to these jazz events and ceremonies, and you have these wonderful young men and women, 20 something, doing these wonderful riffs and playing. And I didn't know that Mamelodi, I thought Mamelodi was a football town, but apparently that is the home of jazz in South
It's
Africa.
the home of jazz, yeah.
Yeah, so they have these kind of 80-year-old something mamas where some of the leading figures in the early movement of the jazz, they brought them there, they were making movements. It was so it's one of the most heartwarming things I have seen, and you don't have to be a jazz person like Bob and I and Phil, I'm sure, to love it. So really go look at it, and really I am happy that someone did that. Oh, at the same time, Bob, actually,
Yeah.
talking of which, there is Netflix just released something called Massacre Kids. There are
Mhm.
these kids who go viral for dancing. So
Yes, the ones who
so
did
it
they
seems
did
that
they did American Got Talent or something like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So some European documentary makers just did something. I cried for the first time in a long time. It's so touching. So those two are Massacre Kids on Netflix and Echoes of Tomorrow on DSTV.
Very
Thanks,
good.
guys.
Yeah.
Have a good time from
Thank
Kampala.
you.
Enjoy yourselves.
Like, share.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
forgot
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yes. Take it away,
No,
Phil.
let's flip it. Also hate, because when you do, people wonder why. Bye, guys.
Okay, what for you lovely people? Okay.